I didn't mean to kill them. If you believe that, you'll understand, maybe even forgive me. I still remember the day like it was yesterday. Margot, my wife, was every bit the epitome of charm and grace. She always knew how to brighten up a room, how to get people to open up, and she used that gift to full advantage. As for me, Thaddeus Henderson, I worked hard my whole life, sacrificing for the family. We built a life of wealth and stability, things neither of us had growing up. But the truth is, over time, the walls started to close in. Margot's mother, Elaine, never seemed satisfied with anything I did. Everything was wrong in her eyes. Our home, our lifestyle, even the way I worked too hard and too long. The old woman constantly fed doubts into Margot's mind, making her question every little thing about our marriage. Every sharp look, every hidden grin, I saw them all, and I heard what they whispered about me. When Elaine fell ill last year, she insisted on living with us, and things spiraled from there. She was barely able to move and could hardly speak at the end, but her gaze held judgment. I often thought Margot found solace in her mother's criticisms. It was her way of validating all the dissatisfaction she hid from me. And then came the moment that made everything unravel. Elaine had stashed away a substantial inheritance, money saved from her husband's estate and insurance. I'd heard Margot discussing it with her a few times, late at night when she thought I wasn't listening. They plotted together, always whispering like conspirators. When Elaine passed, Margot revealed she intended to use the inheritance for a life apart from me, her new start. The day it happened, I sat across from Margot in silence. She looked at me coldly, colder than I'd ever seen. She had nothing left to say, not a word about the 15 years we'd spent together. I saw her mind was made up, saw how she had drained the life we built. She'd leave me to start anew with Elaine's money, while I'd be left with nothing but the empty shell of what we once were. So I did it. In the heat of the moment, I grabbed her, and my hands found her throat. The memory's hazy, but I can still feel the fury coursing through me, the red-hot rage filling my veins. And then, after it was done, I sat there in silence, staring at her lifeless body. When the police arrived, they found me in that same position, frozen, everything unraveling around me. They took me in, questioned me. The words tumbled out of me in fragments, like pieces of a puzzle I could barely piece together myself. Each time I spoke, I wondered if they'd ever understand. How could they? How could anyone know what it felt like to watch someone tear apart your life so completely? Elaine's inheritance was supposed to secure our future, our comfort. Instead, it became the wedge that split us apart, that pushed Margot toward dreams of escape, of a life I wasn't part of. I don't know when she started to look at me as the enemy, but it's as if I was the last one to find out. My own wife, the woman I sacrificed everything for, was ready to leave me behind, toss me away like a broken tool. In the interrogation room, I felt numb, a kind of emptiness settling in that was as vast as it was cold. The detective, Rossi, sat across from me, with a look I couldn't quite read. She was quiet, listening intently, jotting down notes without a flicker of judgment on her face. It unnerved me, that silence, the way she just let me talk until I finally stopped, drained and empty. At some point, my lawyer arrived, his face tight, his suit impeccable. He gave me a brief nod before turning to Rossi. My client won't be answering any further questions without a full understanding of the charges, he stated firmly, his voice a controlled monotone. Rossi glanced at me one last time, her eyes lingering as though she were trying to see something deeper, beyond the walls I'd thrown up. She knew there was more, even if I didn't say it. I sat there, alone again, replaying every moment that led up to that final confrontation with Margot. How she'd looked at me, her face hardened with resolve, how I'd felt the ground slipping from under me, as if she was holding a key to everything I thought was mine. In the end, all I could remember was the snap, the moment everything went black and instinct took over. They placed me in a cell that night, the cold steel bench digging into my back. There was no sleep, only the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional distant murmur of voices. Each sound pulled me back to that room, to the shock of realizing what I'd done, and to the crushing weight of silence that followed. But that was just the beginning. The trial came faster than I expected. They built their case on whispers, on theories, on what they called premeditated rage. That phrase stuck with me. How could rage ever be calculated? Controlled? My lawyer tried to paint a picture of a broken man, pushed too far, betrayed by the two people he'd trusted most. He claimed that Margot and Elaine's plans to cut me out of their lives, out of our home, had driven me to a breaking point. The prosecution didn't buy it, though. To them, I was a man who had turned his frustration into violence, someone who had waited for his moment to seize back control. It was about power, they argued. The defendant could not stand the idea of losing it, of being left behind. Each word was a hammer blow, pounding me into the image of a monster, a man who snapped at the hint of betrayal. Margot's friends took the stand, describing her as a warm, loyal woman who'd supported me through thick and thin. They painted her as the victim of a man who never appreciated her, who pushed her away. The worst part, I saw some truth in their words. I'd let work consume me. I'd left Margot alone in our beautiful home, with nothing but her mother's voice echoing around her. But was that enough to push her to betray me, to make plans behind my back? In the end, I was the only one who could tell the story from my side. Against my lawyer's advice, I took the stand. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't a heartless man. I told them about the years I worked long hours to build a life for us, about the late nights Margot waited up, and how slowly things changed, how Elaine's presence in our home chipped away at the few tender moments we had left. Elaine's inheritance was meant for our future together, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I thought we were a team. I didn't know. I paused, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. I didn't know they saw me as an outsider in my own home. The jury watched, silent and unblinking. It was a hollow relief when I stepped down, knowing that nothing I'd said could erase what I'd done. The closing arguments came, and my fate was sealed. They sentenced me to 15 years. 15 years to sit in a prison cell and reckon with the silence, the darkness, and the choices I'd made. I'd gone from the man who had everything to a man who had lost it all in one brutal moment. And as the cell door slammed shut, the cold metal echoing in the empty room, I finally understood that there was no going back. No absolution, no forgiveness, just the unchanging truth of what I'd done, locked away as tightly as I was. The days in prison blend together, each one as gray and hollow as the last. Time moves differently here, slow and unyielding, stretching the seconds into something almost unbearable. I've learned to live with the routine, to endure the monotony, but at night, when the prison quiets down, that's when the memories creep in. Sometimes, I wonder if I imagined it all, if the life I shared with Margot and the betrayal that followed were nothing more than a fevered nightmare. But then, I feel the roughness of the cot beneath me, the cold concrete walls, and I know that it's real. I know that I'm here because of what I did. Every now and then, I see her, in dreams mostly, or maybe hallucinations brought on by the silence. Margot appears in flashes, her face softened by candlelight or blurred by laughter. It's never the cold, distant version of her that lingered in the months before that final day. Instead, it's the woman I fell in love with, the one who laughed easily, who looked at me like I was her whole world. In those moments, I almost believe she still cares, that she might understand why things happened the way they did. But the memories that haunt me the most are the ones of that last day. The shock on her face, the way her eyes widened in terror as I approached, the raw fear. That look will follow me to the end of my days. Life inside these walls has its own rhythm, its own rules, and in some twisted way, I've found a place in it. I've learned to keep my head down, to avoid the gangs and the hardened men who make up their own law. I've seen what happens to the ones who don't adapt, who cling to their old lives and refuse to accept this new reality. They break, slowly, until there's nothing left of who they were. I won't be one of them. A few weeks ago, a letter arrived. It was from Elaine's lawyer, informing me of her passing. There was no sympathy in the words, no kindness, just cold facts. Elaine left behind a will, and against all odds, she left me a portion of her inheritance. I can't make sense of it. Why she would do such a thing, after everything. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe some twisted final insult. But the thought gnaws at me. She's dead, and I'm left with this small piece of her legacy, a reminder of the life that slipped away. I've thought about what I'll do with it. I could refuse it, turn it over to charity, or let it go to waste. Or maybe I could use it to set something right, though I'm not sure what right even looks like anymore. The money is tainted, just like everything it touched. The nights are the worst. Alone with my thoughts, I'm left to sift through every choice, every word, every look that led me here. I wonder if it could have been different, if I could have saved any part of the life I once knew. But the silence doesn't answer, and I know that the only truth left for me is the one I can't escape. And maybe someday, when I'm out, if I ever get out, I'll walk away with the remnants of Elaine's inheritance and start a life far from the shadows of my past. But for now, I'm still here, serving a sentence not just of time, but of regret, and a longing that nothing in this world could ever put to rest. It's strange how, over time, prison becomes a kind of home. The cold concrete, the clanging metal, the muffled shouts from distant cells, they start to feel familiar. The walls don't judge me. They just hold me in, keep me from the world that I can never truly return to. In the end, I've made peace with the fact that I'll carry this burden with me forever. I once thought the worst part of prison would be the confinement, but it's the freedom in here that's the hardest. The freedom to relive every choice, every missed chance, to walk away from the edge. I'm free to confront the man I was, and the man I became in those final terrible moments. A few weeks ago, I received a letter from someone I never expected to hear from, my brother. We hadn't spoken in years, hadn't had much to say to each other since I'd thrown myself into my career and left him behind in a world that felt foreign to me. But his letter, it was just a few lines, saying he'd heard about what happened, saying he didn't understand, but that he was there if I ever wanted to talk. I haven't written back yet. I don't know if I can, or what I would even say. How do you put into words something so vast, so empty, that it leaves you hollow? But knowing he's out there, that someone out there remembers me, as something more than this, it's a small comfort, one I didn't know I needed. In a few years, I'll have a shot at parole. I'm not sure if I'll get it, or if I even want it. The outside world feels distant now, like a place I once dreamed about, but never really knew. I imagine myself out there, walking streets filled with strangers, seeing faces that might look at me and know, somehow, the weight I carry. But I think I could do it. Start over somewhere. Live a life that's smaller, quieter. Maybe I'd get a job, spend my days doing something simple, something that doesn't leave room for ambition or betrayal. If I ever get that chance, I know I'll leave behind Elaine's money. It's cursed, tied to a life that doesn't belong to me anymore. I'll walk away from it and build something of my own, however small, however humble. Maybe then I'll find a peace that's eluded me all this time. For now, I wait. And every day, I make my peace a little more. I can't change what I've done, can't erase the choices that led me here. But perhaps, just perhaps, I can start again. Live out the rest of my days in a way that finally feels right. So this is my story. This is the life I made, the life I destroyed, and the one I hope to rebuild, piece by piece. And maybe one day, when the time is right, I'll step out of this place and leave the ghost of the man I was behind these walls.